So I thought I'd make a video because I wanted to talk about some things I was thinking of. And, I wish there was evidence of this, but I wanted to talk about the astronaut that was, in Good Elementary many years ago. I don't know what grade I was in. I think I was in 5th grade, 4th or 5th grade. So I was about 11. I was about 10 to 11 years old. I think I was in 5th grade because I think it was around that time when I was in 5th grade, I was making straight A's. That's when academics became easy for me. In fact, the mathematics was so easy for me at that time. I was getting straight A's. I mean, I didn't have to do any. It was very easy for me when I was in 5th grade, and which I failed 1st grade, so I'm not making any excuses. But I remember being in and I was thinking of the astronaut, the old man, when he was talking, giving a speech. And they used to have seminars and stuff. And you got to keep in mind, Michael Jackson. It's all over the place. Especially since by this time Frankie's already left Good Elementary. All these, rapes with, Bill and everything that went on. But I was thinking of the idea that what were his exact words and everything. And I did say this part. He put very paramount that he told everybody in the classroom, he says, if you put your mind to it and your focus, your dreams can happen here. And he was very, pretty patriotic, U.S., right? And he was like, your dreams can happen. And he told a teacher, a math teacher, and I think it was my teacher, Miss Heather, and said, and I want to say it was Miss Heather that said, or Miss Gillard. And he said, look, give me a geometry algebra question or something like that. I don't know. It was like some sort of mathematics through it, and he could calculate it very fast. He could just either throw numbers and he could calculate it very fast in his mind. It was very impressive. That all was 100% accurate, but I want to say this is what he said, because I'm reading his body language as he's sort of, when I'm playing this videotape of what I can remember, and I want to say he did this, and he goes and he says, except for that one. Or he said it, except that one. And when I'm trying to remember if he said except for that one, and then he turns around talking. So in my opinion, I'm like 90% sure to 90 to 100% sure that this guy knew about what Miguel did. But the idea of it was Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, when you show up, you got to keep in mind, Michael Jackson had this fame before computers were accessible in people's homes. So everyone had a television, but not everyone had a computer. I didn't grow up with a computer. I knew a lot of kids that didn't grow up with computers in their houses. So when I was in 4th and 5th grade, when computers were available, you had to be pretty wealthy, or you had, and the only understanding of computers that you were able to get was when you were in school and you went to computer lab. And you went to a computer lab in Good Elementary, and they had all these computers lined up in a big, very large room, all lined up against the walls, and that's how you learned the functions of a computer, how to then start typing and whatnot, and moving the mouse, like getting an idea of what a computer is. And at that age, I was in 4th grade. I was in 3rd and 4th grade when we were learning these concepts of computers. So Michael Jackson, his fame was so skyrocketed, unbelievable, that there's no way that anybody that was going to go to that school, especially since the LGBT community was such a tight organization, that everyone was going to know, period. So all the entertainers, any speakers, anybody was going to know about that. And I want to say, I remember this guy saying, except for that one. So when he says that, except for that one, I don't know if it was, he said that because in some sort of a conversation, or it was after someone threw him some numbers and he got one of them wrong. I don't think he got any of them wrong, but he could have gotten something wrong or shy off a few numbers because they gave him like 4 or 5 random to do in his mind. Or it was later down that road of the speech where he then says, except for that one. And he knows about Michael Jackson. So, and I'm in the, you got to keep in mind, I'm the one that met Michael Jackson. I don't believe there was, I guarantee you, Michael Jackson didn't show up again for anybody in that school. So when I'm in that audience, and he's saying that, he knows, because I was sitting somewhere near the front row. I was like on the third or second row. I wasn't at the very front, but I was like second or fourth row of kids. And it's in the cafeteria, old school cafeteria where they used to have it at Elementary. For those that remember, you could probably get the pictures of what it used to look like there. And I think it's important for me to talk about. I think it's important for me to talk about because it's very important. It's very important to talk about that, you know. And what's so crazy about this? Okay, there used to be a guy, and it makes me think now how much of the experiences were really toxic. Let me tell you this. I mean, that guy, Astronaut, he knew about it. He knew, but he wasn't. In my opinion, he didn't seem. I think he seemed too smart to be able to even get emotionally involved like most people do. He seemed more like a leader, in my opinion. Someone that, okay, well, this is what we got to do, and this is what we got to do, and this is, he was certain of himself. But more to himself, you know, of what he needs to do. And like he held a high ranking of something. Well, of course, he's an astronaut, right? But I want to say this because I'm in Good Elementary, and there's this kid by the name of Reggie. He used to do the worm, like really, really good. He used to live in front of EDL's house, Hector. Makaka or something like that. I don't know. It's Hector. There's another guy named Hector. I went to school with him, Good Elementary. He's been married, has a high level degree, and he has a girlfriend, or he has a wife by the name of Brittany. Well, anyway, right in front of his house is Summit Apartments, and I talked about that. His parents used to sell cocaine. It was fucked up. They're like high level drug traffic cocainers. Anyway, when he used to go in front of his house, I had seen this guy do the worm, and he was a real long, tinted looking. He looked like, you know, the guy. I think he played for the Indiana Pacers. Reggie, I don't know, but anyway. This guy was really linked, kind of light colored, shaved head, young. And he used to be able to do the worm entirely on the ground and be able to stand up. Like, stand up and then do the worm and then be able to stand up. That was really difficult. And I remember, anyway, I found out, because I remember rolling around there, that his mom was the lady at the cafeteria at Good Elementary that was like there for like 5 or 6 years. She was there for like 5 or 6 years. And she was the black lady that had hazel eyes. She looked like she was mixed. She was half white, half black. And she had hazel eyes, but she was very rugged. I don't know if this person could have been a transgender. Maybe this person could have been. But they were very rugged. And the reason I say this is because I remember her getting an attitude with me. She was very hardened. She was a very hard person because there was all these kids, and she was like almost kind of military but hardened. And I remember Miss Heather standing behind me because she was like raising her voice or some shit, and she goes like this, like she was kind of like behind me, kind of like protecting me at the time. And she kind of settled down. But I remember she like started yelling at me or something. I don't know, like, and she goes, yeah, blah, 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 blah. But you got to understand, I never talked to any of the cafeteria people. I was always very nice. I was a very polite person to understanding that that was what they did, and it's just a cafeteria lady. And I say this because I think it's important that if this person knew about Michael Jackson, this is how it then correlates. And people start taking actions of it, and they take it down on a child because they know that they have to confine and train the child in order to get the output eventually of what they want. And it's in their favor, not mine. But I'm paying for it. Just like Frankie's getting raped, you give him money later words. Well, those guys not only did caught and did rapes, but it affected my mother and me ultimately. And then you want to give him money for it. And it's just, look how tough he is. And that's ultimately, that's what they did. And they did get away with it. And I think it's important for me to talk about because the interactions. I mean, I know those, but other than that, I did have really bad arguments with that person. I really didn't. They just seemed pretty neutral, and they really didn't want to communicate with me too much. I remember them seeing me when I was with Robert. Robert Zarate was not scared. I mean, and I saw this lady break in front of Robert, in front of me, like as a person, like start laughing and giggling. Like I'd seen Robert do that, Zarate do that to several people, like break in front of me that you'd seen hard, very hard. But the reason I say this is because I think it's important for me to discuss it as an astronaut. And he was very, very assertive of himself, and he talked about dreams. He said that if you set your mind to it, you can complete your dreams. You can do your dreams. You can do it. Yes, you can. Yes, you can do it. You can do it. You can make it happen. And he was like very certain. He seemed more like, to me, like very much like smart. I mean, astronauts are fucking geniuses. You have to be extremely, extremely, extremely smart. I don't care any position that you're in, but he was a white guy, kind of short, but he still had hair, but it was like he looked like it was white. You know how some white people that have gray hair, their hair turns white. It doesn't necessarily turn gray. It goes from like gray to white instead of just staying gray and decaying. Well, this guy he had like white hair. Like it went from blonde to like a white hair, like a shiny white. You ever seen like a shiny white hair on an old person? It's very uncommon. It's usually, I think, only in genetics of blonde hair people. I think it's only in blonde people that only have blonde hair only, and I think a majority of that is men, not the females. Sometimes females, but the hair will turn white, I'm talking about like a white, like nearly like a white, like white like that. And it has maybe a tint of gray hair, if that, but it's because they're old. That's how the hair ages to them. That's wild because and I say this because, look, I talked about this already earlier. There was a band. I don't know what year this was, and it was around the same time. It was somewhere around because Titanic came out. I was somewhere around 4th to 6th grade. So I was about 11 years old. I was about 10 to 11 years old when this happened. I remember this, because I remember very distinctly the first time I watched Titanic, and Titanic came out when I was 13 years old. I was 12 to 13 years old when Titanic came out, and we were always watching it at the dollar movies. Like, it was there for like 2 years. I'm not kidding. It was there, and we always went to go see it, and it was a long movie, and we saw reruns of it all the time. And we were at the dollar movies watching it all the time, so it was there for 2 years. I left Good Elementary when I was 13 years old because, I was in 6th grade. At the end of 6th grade, I was 13 years old. But I do know that this band, you ever seen the band, the Titanic, the band that plays underneath the boat? the poor people. You see Leonardo DiCaprio and his Italian buddy, you know, and they go dancing downstairs, and he's with his girl, Leonardo DiCaprio, and the band starts playing. Leonardo starts dancing with the little girl, and then he says, "Well, I'm gonna," you know, he sets the girl to the little side, and then gets his, you know, his date. Well, that band that you see right there is the same individuals that played at Good Elementary. I want to say it was 2 years before that movie came out. So they got that gig because they were touring. I remember them saying to everybody they were on tour. So they stopped by Good Elementary to, you know, play a performance, and they were going to anywhere they can get a performance. They would play a performance to tour, because to my understanding, if I remember, if I think this correctly, they didn't know they were going to get that gig, because, you know, I don't know how long it took Titanic to come out, but by then they had already created a following, and then, hey, why not? We'll have this play guy for Titanic. So that entire band played, and I know I'm 100% they knew, but they just they knew, because I remember seeing the guy with the cello as well, because I remember the guy kind of bending over and fixing something, and he kind of moved very quickly as I was walking, because I waited until everyone was gone, and it was just me, and it was just maybe could have been one or two other kids or one other teacher, but I want to say the cafeteria was empty, and I wanted to, you know, go in there and say, "Hey, y'all sound really good, y'all," but I could tell that the sort of sudden body language that it was you know, we did something and I remember seeing the guy in the cello kind of doing that, and or some sort of instrument that he had, and but I remember the body language, they sort of synchronized together, but I could remember, but I had nothing that, you got to keep in mind, I don't know anything about, there's nothing in my mind, so when I approach the situation and I look over at them, I was trying to tell them, "Oh, that, you know, it sounds really good. It sounds really good," because they were, you know, playing this sort of drums that sounded really good. It sounded pretty cool, and the different instruments, and they played that same exact song as a performance. And if you don't believe me, you can ask anybody that went to Good Elementary, and they'll all tell you that. But I very distinctly remember being at the movie theater when I first saw Titanic. And I think it could have been maybe 6 months after. It took a little while for me to kind of remember that, where did I know this song from? And I was like, bingo. I was like, hey, those are the guys that I listened to many years ago whenever I was at Good Elementary. But isn't that pretty wild, huh? That's one of the most highest grossing movies of all time. I think it's a top 5. Could it be? I think it was number 6 or number 7 now, but I want to say it's in the top 5. I want to say, I don't know, it's been a while. I recently looked top grossing movies, and I think it was the top 5. It used to be top number 1 for a long time, but it's the top, somewhere around the top 5. And you know, I think it's something to think about, because they knew about it. You know, that's pretty wild, huh? Because Michael Jackson did all this, and now these guys performed. There was nobody in the cafeteria. I don't know. It was I don't know how I ended up walking by, or asked to go use the restroom once we went to class, and I just walked by there to see if they were still there. And they were still packing up their on stage. All of them were still on stage, still packing up their materials and whatnot. And I think it's important for me to say this, because they got the gig 2 years later. They blew up, and they got the gig at Titanic. And I don't know the network of how all that comes about, because Hollywood had to have known all about it. But anyway, so that's the story. So thought I'd talk about that. And I was thinking of this when I was thinking of this astronaut, when I'm not sure about this, but when he said, except for that one, and I'm like 75% sure that he said this. Okay, I'm almost up to 80 to think this guy said, except for that one. But he didn't express it in a way, it was, the expression was very different from when I come across other people that talked about situations like that. It was very different. To me, he seemed like a leader. Yeah, he's not only just really smart, but highly educated. He was in a business suit. He was entirely in a suit, in a business suit. And but I remember him saying, except for that one, and he was very certain. So, and I was the only kid in school, so out of the entire class, so he knew he was talking about me and Michael Jackson, because at this time Michael Jackson has so much. You won't get anything like that again, because it's a different era. Something else can be famous again, but not at that. In my opinion, not that caliber. You're not. It's not going to be able to. That was just for the enjoyment of the period of the time of what that era was. Just like many different eras of time were very different to people. 70s and 60s, I hear, were very delightful to some people because technology really fucked everything up. And but I think it's important for me to talk about this because I'm trying to analyze what he had said, because he probably knew people were going to use him. And so you have all these predators and all these other people start showing up, and then they start going after us because all they're thinking about is, except for that one, look at Michael Jackson. Oh, Michael Jackson. I feel motivated for Michael. Oh, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson. Because that's what people did. The belief of God and the belief of good and right, I think, have a domestic carrying all through human life. But there's also segments of generations that changes it. Okay? Like electricity and committing sin were entirely separated many years ago. So, like for an example, the evolution of right and wrong. If you believe in the Bible, but you don't gamble, because the Bible says, but you play video games, and is that gambling? That's an electrical circuit and visual thing that you're seeing. Is it really gambling? Is it? Or you can go into more details, so I think there's a lot of that also does change in the circumstances that you're just in. But I'm trying, I remember him saying that, except for that one, and he was just knew that people were going to go after him, and he knew that Miguel may have fucked up, but or whatever he did what he did, he should have been in prison. But he says, except for that one, he knew that people were going to go after him. He knew, and that's why he said that, because there's just too many people. You get 1,000 people in a fucking crowd, you're gonna get one of them who will shoot your ass. You get one of them, if you don't know what's going on, you get one of them that just that's how mathematics works. Okay, in crowds of people, you get 10,000 people. Police officers understand this. For every 600 or 700 people, it is required by, I think, state law that there has to be 2 to 3 police officers at minimum for every 500 to 600 people in any given situation. And the more that doubles, the more that goes on, the more that doubles, the more police officers and percentage is requirement to be there. And that is because you're guaranteed to have destruction. You're guaranteed, there's 100% you will. That is not a question if, you will. Because you just have too many people in a circumstance of whatever it is, regardless if there's alcohol there or not, you will have those problems. It's there. So I think it's important for me to talk about this guy flew to outer space. He didn't go to the moon. I wouldn't doubt if this guy knew or met the guy that landed on the moon. I wouldn't doubt it at all, because when he showed up, and when I was in 5th grade, I'm going to say I was in 5th or 4th grade. I wasn't in 6th grade. I was in 5th or 4th grade. He was already 70 years old. Like, he was an old, healthy 70-year-old guy. I mean, he could have been at the youngest 67 to 68, youngest. But you could tell by looking at him, he was old, but very healthy old. Like a very, very healthy person. Old white guy that seemed like he ate a lot of the good foods, and it seemed I don't know what really, because I've always had my own understanding, belief of why I think some people live that long and still their brains still work very good at very old age. And I think it has something to do with just the education, is that you're always learning new things, and something keeps you alive that way. I don't know. I think that's what my opinion is. Besides just eating the food that is nutritional here and there, it is the fact that they're always exercising their brain to learning new things and evolving with their brains and learning new, and exercising their brains. That's why they live so long and so healthy for such a long time. That's sort of my opinion of it. But yeah, this guy was 70 years old, maybe more. He could have even been about 72, 70, but he was in his youngest 68 youngest. So to be 67, say he was 67, 68 years old. Louis Armstrong or Louis D. Otis Armstrong? You know, the guy that landed on the moon? He first landed on the moon in the 60s, didn't he? In the early 70s to late 60s, I can't remember. So when he landed on the moon, this is around 1995, 1996. So let's go back 30 years from that. He's 1995, 1996. Take away 30 years from his age, because he's 67 years old. That would make him 37 years old, wouldn't it? So he would have been 37 years old. He would have been 37 years old when the man landed on the first moon, which he would have made him an astronaut. I want to say he was an astronaut. I don't know what ages astronauts go. I don't know, if he worked for NASA. He worked for NASA, but I don't know how it works. You work for NASA for 20 years and decide to go to the space, and then they let you, and then you do your sort of thing there, and you come back to NASA and continue your career. Or you just an astronaut. You go to space, but you don't work at NASA. You work at a different lab, and then I don't know how all that works, but I just know that he would have been about 35 years old, an estimated 35 to 38 years old, 1970. Or no, so take 30 years away from 1995, 85, 75, 65. So 1965, he would have been 37 years old. 37 years old, that is pretty much about the age, I think, when astronauts start going to space. Because they've already accumulated all the knowledge, practices, acceptances. Because I don't think everyone gets accepted in NASA. There's a lot of people that qualify, exceed, but very few get accepted. And then the ones that kept on getting failed, they keep applying, and some eventually stop, some continue to do it. I know there's a movie I haven't watched. It's about a Mexican guy that was from a family of farm workers and went to space, and he went on a mission to space for some sort of support on a satellite station to give support. I don't know what it was, but it would have made him 1965. He would have been 37, 30, pretty rough estimate, 35 to 38 years old, and 1965. Louis Armstrong, I don't remember his name, but he landed on the moon. So let's just say that I think the average young age of someone going to space is somewhere between 40 to 35. That's like the youngest, because everything they have to accumulate degrees and knowledge and practices and whatnot. But I think it's important for me to talk about, because if this guy landed on the moon and this guy was already smart enough, I bet you this guy actually he could have even said that in class and in a seminar, but I just don't remember. This guy is very likely to have met people that landed on the moon, the first human being to land on a different planet. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? And he was talking about Michael Jackson. That's pretty wild, huh? That's pretty wild. It's think it's pretty wild, gosh. Because he met, I want to say, it's hard to remember because for me to go in my mind and be like, okay, I remember this guy, and because he was wearing a blue suit. If I remember correctly, he was wearing a blue suit, almost similar to this, like a blue suit, kind of, and all blue. And I think it's important for me to say this, and I think it's important for me to say something about this because this guy met the guy that landed on a different planet for all human existence in life that's ever happened. He landed on the moon, and he talked to this guy. He showed up to our class. He showed up to the school. I don't know. I want to say there were the majority of us. The majority of us were in that class. I mean, in that sort of event or seminar or whatever you want to call it. That there's the speech that someone gives. I don't think the entire school was there. I want to say there was a little bit of space that some classes or teachers or some grades didn't show up. And because if they don't have the whole school there, a lot of the times, in the same day, they won't just give the same repeated speech in a single day. So, they won't give a speech at 9 o'clock and say everything needed to say and then wait for the kids at 12 o'clock to then show up again and then give the speech all over. Sometimes it will, but I don't think it's like that. If at best, it'll be like the next day. They'll do it to a different school or a different grade or something like that if it's necessary. But to my understanding, this guy did meet, he very likely had met the guy that landed on the moon for the first time in human existence. And there he was in my school. So there you go. I thought I'd talk about that and share that. But, this is a long time ago. I was, what does it matter now? Like, it's pretty cool to know about that, Like, wow, this guy probably talked to the guy that landed on the moon on a different planet. All the stars and galaxies. Like, he really was from a different world. He was he went to a different world, literally a different world, a different planet, a different solar, in the solar system that we live in. He was no longer a part of Earth. He was traveling out of Earth, like floating in space, and like that had to have been really intense. And the first human to ever do it in life. But I think it's important for me to talk about. I did talk to him. I didn't talk to him. And after the class was over, there were a few kids that kind of rushed up, and they were like kind of the nerdy kids. And I remember just looking at them, and I was just kind of like shaking my head, kind of like, kind of like that, kind of like, because this guy he looked very smart. To me, he didn't show very much flamboyancy, in my opinion. He was wearing an all blue suit, but he didn't have like very much of a breakage of something of that nature. But there was a number of kids, and I wanted to approach him, but once again, the kids would just run up really fast. Like when we wanted to shake hands, and I wanted to shake hands and met the guy that went to Auschwitz. I was really disappointed with that because there was just too many kids, and he got to make eye contact. And he just looked at me and he goes like that, like the guy I met in Auschwitz, or not Auschwitz, but the Holocaust camps. But I wanted to tell him, my father was here to help whatever was going on with the time that you lived in. He was a nurse. I wanted to go and tell him that, but I was very disappointed in that. I really wanted to, but anyway, so a lot of these kids rushed him, and I looked at him, and I was like, wow, okay. And he really did. He just kind of looked, and I remember him looking and very focused at the kids and looking, and then I just left, but didn't pay a whole too much attention to him after the speech was over. Just saw everything. Wanted was take a few steps, like I was going to make an approach, to talk or to meet this guy that from a different solar system. But I was like, oh, there's a lot of kids, okay. I take what he said, and I remember the key role of it is that, do you remember what someone had told you that was that crucial? Because when he talked about it that in a way that I'm not sure. It's very common when people give speeches of they always want to help the future generations. A lot of the times they always want to find one or two people out of a huge crowd of kids and people that's going to listen to them, that's truly going to carry that baton and truly listen to the wisdom of what they have to share, because they're as genuine and as raw as they're going to get. And they also are aware that they're coming to the end and short part of their own life. It's saying things like many different speech goers out there in the world. You know, you got like drug rehabilitation teachers that do this because of the lessons they learned in life. The same thing with old people. Some of them, not too many of them. But I do know that that's the way he spoke. He spoke, I don't know what's the correct vocabulary word, like not contradicting, very certainty of himself, but like very formal, like formal and directive, and like there's a structure in the United States that happens, and all that's going on, and this is how smart we are. This is how we work as a unit of intelligence. Regardless of everything that's going on, is to get those brains together and to make the country happen the way that it is. So my vocabulary isn't that good or that high. So, but he spoke like that. So the key role is, to me, as I remember walking away, is that I take in as much as he can share about what he wanted to say at that speech. And people will be astonished. I don't know if they had any cameras. Sometimes mothers and teachers would take cameras, flashes obviously, but they would bring their camcorders to watch performances and videotape performances for the kids. So you might be able to find a videotape of him speaking and pictures. You'll probably find pictures. Very likely you'll find some pictures. You know, you got 600 students that go into the entire Good Elementary at that time. So you're likely to find one picture, possibly. You got a decent, good chance of finding a picture somewhere. And he saw also the Titanic crew that was playing there live. I want to say I remember when the Titanic was playing. I do remember flashes, because those guys are kind of rowdy, you know, like they were all getting everybody pumped up and stuff. But the astronaut, he was like giving a speech, like he was on stage by himself. There's no podium. It's just like him, and he's elevated in the speech like a stair, one-step stair, carpeted, and he's, you know, looking at everything that's going on, looking at everything that's, you know, giving a speech, and very directed, like he's giving a message. He very much looked like he wanted to give a message. He wanted to give a message of assurance of what he wanted to say, and that's how he spoke. So I don't know. That's the story of it. So pretty wild. So this guy, the guy from Titanic, and they got that gig. They got that gig to play at the movie. I was like, dang, because I remember watching the movie. It's like I saw those guys. I was like, but wow. I was like, they ended up getting that big. That was a lucky gig. I'm not sure if people thought Titanic was gonna. I don't know the story of Titanic, the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm not sure very many people understood how many of them thought it was going to be as big as it was. I knew they thought it was going to be a big film, but not like that big. Maybe they did. I don't know. But they got that gig to play there on that scene and promote their movie, and it's the world's most grossing movie. It's one of the most famous movies of all time. So, yeah, it was wild, you know. That's wild. And I met the astronaut that met the guy that landed on the first moon. I want to say, I think he said that, if I remember, that I think he said he met the guy. He could have. I don't know. I'm kind of sketchy on that, whether he met him or not. But it's very likely that he did. It's very likely that he was 40 years old. Let's say 40 years old at... He's 35 years old, and he's working as an astronaut anywhere between the ages of 35 to 55 years old. The guy that landed on the moon, this guy had to have met this guy because they work at NASA. It's very likely he came across, or he was working with him at some point, or he came by to teach his knowledge or whatever, and to this guy, because you know, when you crunch down the amount of time that people were probably doing at that era of time, you know, you'll have, you know, landed on the moon 1967 or 1971, right? This guy's 35, he lands on the moon, he comes back to NASA. He doesn't become an astronaut until he's 40 years old. So the guy landed on the first moon and he landed back to NASA, he had to have, you know, came across him and met him in his crew, you know, and I want to say that he did. He actually met him in real life. But anyway, I thought I'd share another planet story.